Okay, now that we've covered about yanking bass levels down because our limiter is just going to be a fixed part of our life from here on out, now let's switch to drums. And the first problem I see, and this is a sound that's very seducing. I know it got me. Uh, kind of like that first girlfriend that, ruined your life and you want her dead now. I think I'm still mad about that one. That was 16 years ago. Anyway, this is a similar situation. There's a certain alluringness, there's a certain sexiness to this whole ultra compressed snare top. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, I've got a regular old snare drum, and we've probably got a few things on the drum bus, but you'll get the idea here. Here's what I had before. And that's just your good old meat and taters dynamic on top of a snare. Probably a 57, but maybe a Audix i5. And nothing really special about that, but it sounds okay in context. I like what I got in the whole grand scheme of things, so I went with it. And I didn't have anything on it except for this low shelf cut here. But a lot of guys will do something more like this. And I'm using the stock Cubase enveloper, which I actually find to be a pretty awesome little tool. It's like an ASDR, attack sustained, yeah, or ADSR, whatever that is, that a lot of the synths have. But you can adjust the attack. Let's go back to 0. And that's what we started with. And a whole lot of guys love this sound way more. And what the problem is, and it seems like the narrower that initial peak, the better. And so you can kind of see we have a button that'll kind of see. I have it turned up all the way, so it's kind of crappy probably. Oh, there it is. That was the sound that I fell in love with years ago, and now I'm just mad because that bitch took me for everything I was worth. That's what it feels like. And once upon a time, I learned this the hardest way imaginable. It was at the Michael Wagner workshop, and he wanted to hear some of the stuff we had done. Well, I had just gotten mastering back from my latest project, and I hired a certain famous guy. He's all over that Gear Whores site. Anyway, he's a pretty famous guy, highly respected, and I sent him an email about mastering, and he said, yeah, let's do it. And I told him that my budget was super tight, and he goes, well, I'll just work super fast. And what happened is I had I call now transient dependent drums, which means that drums that relied on this sound right here, and they wouldn't cut through all those guitars and stuff if I didn't have that sound. Now, that just means I approached it backwards, but I liked the mixes before they were mastered. I said, yeah, those drums are just got that same kind of snap to it, I guess we could call it. The problem is, when we set our brick wall limiter, which we've already agreed in earlier videos, that the limiter's a part of life. We have to get up to our -6, -7 levels. There's no way around that if we're going to be loud. And this band had to be loud, no doubt about it. Kill Switch Engage and those kind of bands were at the forefront, and they wanted to sound right there. So with those guys. So anyway, what I learned later in life when I got the mastering back and we played it at Wagner's and on his monitors, and it was just awful. It just sounded so bad. And I was embarrassed because there's this big guy, and we got to be really good buddies with Wagner. He's a really down to earth dude, but it was really frustrating showing off that mix in front of this real guy, and it just sounded like complete crap. And it sounded like complete crap mostly because this master engineer guy just shaved it right off, which actually his limiter shaved it right off. His mistake is not sending me an email saying, "Hey Brandon, I can't take your money. Instead, do this, this, and this." And it could have just wrote like a short email, a little 2-minute email, and I would have been a repeat customer for life. Instead, he just sent me back a bunch of junk. Now, that's another story. That's more of the business end. But the point here that I learned was a limiter is going to exist. And see where my mouse is? We have a little transient guy. Let's just pretend we set our brick wall limiter right here. And so that little transient guy is going to get shaved off anyway. And this is a big factor. Granted, by having that huge transient spike to hit a compressor, we can trigger certain behavior out of a compressor, which can be interesting. So I don't want to rule out entirely. But we have to realize that, generally speaking, that's kind of an effect. Generally speaking, we are not... Ooh, I'm making weird noises. We are not going to get any level past that. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to fall in love with that sound, this sound right here. And having it on a bus is like a parallel bus, and blending that in can be of use a little bit, but we still have to answer for our actions here. And so, and again, I want to show you after this before and after real quick so you understand what I'm talking about clearly. All right, here's what I had. It's real easy to say, well, it's a 70s snare, and here's a modern snare, yeah. Okay, and there's maybe some truth to that some of the time. Of course, we're kind of doing a 70s-like genre right now, but same concept applies even with modern stuff. So now let's go even further. Actually, we don't have to go further. It's important to note that our snare, which we were debating which one was louder, and I think it was this video. Let's see, which one's louder, or it's a tricky balance because we're kind of comparing apples and oranges. It's obvious that our heavy attacked snare is louder in the attack part, but in the actual body of the snare, the other guy, the unprocessed guy, is louder. So it's really a tricky business. If we actually shaved our peak off, which we know we have to here soon, we're actually going to have a softer sounding snare that won't cut through as much. And also, I want to know, I'm clipping by 7.5 decibels. Let's say the two bus says 7.3. So by using this crazy attack, we've chewed out a ridiculous amount of level. If we matched them on a peak level scale, oh man, we'll have to pull this thing down 7 decibels. So we'll go down to -9 and turn it on. This versus there's no real question that we're running ourselves into a wall here. And let me go ahead and show you the wall. The wall is our limiter. Now, back to our super awesome crushed sound, let's say, before. All that cutting attack, right? And now we turn the limiter on. Decidedly less. And it's a million? No, but we are shaving that stuff off. It's going to get worse, though, as we send more and more stuff to it. So let's start bringing in our drums. Let's see, where's my damn drum bus? Okay. Actually, let's do it this way. Okay. Now we got room mics and all kinds of that are distorted and all kinds of weird crap. It was part of this band's sound that I really wanted to capture. So it throws things off a little bit, and that's part of my point. That attack that's chewing up all that damn level isn't really even in there. Okay, so let me switch back to my stock snare, which I have on a different fader here. I'm hearing a lot of that body. Like, we don't hear that initial attack, the initial, but we do hear a lot of, and for this particular sound, I like that. On a metal project, we'll see. I don't know. But I'm going to turn the crush fader back up, the one with all the attack. Every once in a while, you will hear that. So let me pull down the overall volume of the music, and let's play everything at once. And what's interesting there is I don't hear any of that attack. I mean, we've squashed the thing, no doubt about that. But that's the deal. That's the sound we're doing now. So what was the purpose of having that attack in there if it's just going to get shaved off? And again, this is by having that limiter on while we make these decisions. So let's assume we're playing with our snare now, and we're not soloing it. Let's just use the crushed one. We're going to take off envelope shaper and listen. Okay, and it could adds a little bit of a snap. I mean, it'd be nice to have a little bit more pop in that particular snare. Okay, so let's start playing with this doodad now. Here's what we had before. All right, so we got what I'm showing you here is that body of that snare, that 1970 sounding body that we heard on the dry track, is that the one thing that makes that actually cut through in this mix. The body is the sound, and that initial transient was not. Now let's start adding transient with this attack gadget here and see if we start getting anywhere. And what we heard right there, when the whole mix is rocking, that a transient attack is gone. Now, when we have that little solo section where it's just kind of the drums and like one guitar, well, that we can hear the attack clearly. But if the attack isn't showing up in the midst of the rocking, the dense part, it does us no good. I don't like drum sounds that get really attacky and then get real kind of dull. So this kind of idea of a really fast attack on a snare, it can be done, but it has to be done within the confines of the limiter with the mix rocking. And that's the big concept here. And I think if I don't teach you anything else, but hammer the idea in your head that if you're going to have a limiter on anyway, you have to learn how to compensate for that limiter. And a lot of that is just experimenting. And you know, almost any mix. I mean, I had a mix just 3 days ago where I had to actually try. I mean, really, really try after I got the mix pretty good to get the levels I wanted without distortion and that kind of stuff. So it does happen, but every time it's a new art, you really can't memorize this stuff. But I can show you, you know, a whole bunch of things I've done that'll save you a million hours of cussing. So the problem of the snare attack is a huge one. So if you find that your drums disappear whenever you've cranked up your two bus levels too, and again, we didn't even check out, let's make sure our levels were good. Then what you may want to go back to more of a 70s type, kind of a halfway boring snare, and then kind of watch what happens as you're doing all your nastiness at the end. Okay, so the lesson here is if your drums are transient dependent, the limiter will most likely shave those off unless you have intentionally designed your drums to still have that attack even when your limiter is rocking full core. Thanks, guys. Bye.